If you could take your seats, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. My name is Nancy Lopez. I'm the Executive Director of the Washington Council of Lawyers, and I want to welcome all of you here to Fellowships 101, your guide to postgraduate public interest fellowships. We are delighted to see you all here and are thrilled by the excellent panel that we have. I have a few things to tell you about before we dive into the substance of the program. First, I want to tell you a little bit about the Washington Council of Lawyers. You have this handy-dandy brochure. We are a voluntary bar association in D.C. where our mission is to promote pro bono service and the public interest practice of law. So we bring together lawyers and law students and lawyers from all sectors of the legal community, from government, from law firms, from public interest organizations. And all of those people working together can advocate and train and kind of cultivate the next generation of people serving those who otherwise couldn't afford legal representation. So it is a warm community, it is a great networking place, and it can help you get the skills and connections you need to do great pro bono and public interest work. You can join as a law student. I know many of you signed up for our free email list where you'll learn about the events and programs that we have going on. As a member, you receive our monthly Public Interest Jobs Clearinghouse. It is a once-a-month email publication that tells you about public interest jobs in DC and all around the country, so it's a great resource. I want to welcome also to tell you about some other resources that are available to you. Christina Jackson, she is from NELP, and she's going to tell you a little bit about what things you can learn from PSJD.
Oh, that's me. Okay. So, okay, I'm standing over here because, where's my, no. All right. So, of course, it worked just fine when you guys weren't in here looking at me. But now, all right, so here is PSJD. Whoops, there's PSJD. So let me give you a little bit of background. PSJD started out as a place for pro bono. It morphed into a place for internships, and we're now bringing it back around to pro bono. So there are a lot of things that you can do with PSJD and learn about on PSJD. As Nancy said, I'm Christina Jackson. I'm the Director of Public Service Initiatives and Fellowships at NALP. NALP is an associate member organization that brings together law schools, legal employers, and law students. So lots of different things that NALP can do for you. In particular, since you're here learning about fellowships, you're going to be most interested, I suspect, in the public interest and public service portion of what NALP can do. And one of the things that we do in order to promote career development and recruitment and retention is provide PSJD. Really quickly, it is two things from your perspective. It is a jobs posting place, so you see search with the people looking earnestly for positions. In the job search, you'll see internships, paid and unpaid. You'll see entry-level positions. Later in your career, you may be interested in more lateral type positions. But you will also find pro bono opportunities, both student and attorney. So if you're interested in doing some pro bono, you may be sitting for the New York Bar and have to do some pro bono before you get licensed. That is a good place to start looking for opportunities. The thing we're going to focus on today is here in the middle, the Resource Center. And this is going to be a place where you're going to go to learn. So both at the beginning, and in particular, we're here talking about postgraduate fellowships. So what is a postgraduate fellowship? What does it look like? I encourage all of you, I started out practicing law, then became a counselor, and I'm now at NALP where I can do sort of all of it. So let me put on my counselor hat for a minute and say to you, if you are interested in postgraduate fellowships, it behooves you to really do some good self-assessment. Fellowships are for people who have an entrepreneurial spirit. Some fellowships will not have a lot of guidance for you. You'll need to sort of make your own rules and that sort of thing. Some people thrive on that and think it's great. Some people would be lost
if they didn't have sort of a set routine and that sort of thing. So these are the things that you want to think about. What type of work environment do you want after graduation? And then how does a fellowship, for instance, fit into your overall career goals? Okay? And then that's going to help you figure out if a postgraduate fellowship is for you. And then you're going to start doing the research on what they are. And so here you'll see these are some of the more popular resources. So here is sort of some general background information. Here's going to be some application tips. The thing that most people come here to look for is the application deadline calendar. It is new for, hi, come on. Okay. Yes, I would like you to open it. It is new for this year. You can search by fellowship type. You can search by deadline type. You can put in some dates. And the nice thing is you can then add it to your favorites. So this is going to be all types of fellowships. There are three basic main types of fellowships. One is organization-based. One is project-based, and that's what we're talking about today when we're talking about Skadden and EJW. And there are also clinical academic fellowships. And so you'll see all of these listed. You'll see the different types. That's going to give you a really good overview on what the fellowships look like. The other thing that I want to show you is, why did they both load? That's weird. In the Resource Center is a brand new resource that I just put up there that I'm kind of proud of. And that is a fellowship chart that I made. And I'm super proud because I did all of the work and all of the research. And I'm totally lying because my publications coordinator, John Bain, took my blank template and did all of the work. But the reason why this is so cool is because he took it above and beyond and really got into where there's some similarities and where there's some differences. These are going to be sort of the top fellowships that somebody with a JD coming out of law school who either wants to practice or wants to do policy or wants to be a social entrepreneur or wants to do something completely different is going to be interested in. And so you'll see we have the EJW and the Skadden, the Soros, the more traditional ones. If you come down here, we'll get into Echoing Green. Those are a little bit more entrepreneurial. Ashoka is one that's really interesting, and I didn't actually know about this one, but our PSJD fellow is quite the social entrepreneur, and this is one of her favorites. So this is her contribution, rather. And then you'll see the foreign placement ones, the foreign language ones, the research ones, a little bit more academic, that sort of thing. So these are the ones that you're going to see that JDs are being tapped for most frequently. And then at the very end are going to be the government programs, the Fulbright, and the Presidential Management Fellows Program, which is a little bit more sort of along the lines of an organization-based fellowship. The reason why I point out the fellowship chart, besides the fact that it took me 3 hours to format it today, is because it is a very good side-by-side, what do these mean, what are the deadlines, what's required kind of document. This is something that you get after years of doing fellowships. You're just coming to fellowships and it probably looks like a bunch of words, right? Okay, so this is going to help in terms of that self-assessment and that research. Then, once you have sort of figured out these are the types of fellowships that I want to look at, I know I want to do a project-based fellowship, who can I do that with? And that's when you're going to use PSJD to do the search, okay? And you're going to see something called employer profiles. Can you all see that? Should I put it up a little bit higher? Okay. Search for employer profiles, okay? Every employer who is in the database has a profile, information about what they do, the type of work that may be involved if you're with that organization, their practice areas, all of that good stuff, okay? You will also see, if you search, that if they have an open posting, let's see if I can get one on the first page. No, it'll have a little symbol like this, okay? And so if you use PSJD and do the employer search and then plug in your criteria, geography, type of practice, how big you want your organization to be, how many attorneys you want in that organization, that type of thing, you can pull this up and it'll tell you not only the current positions, organizations of current positions, but also who does what you want to do in the area that you want to do that. And the reason why that's important is because if you're going after a project-based fellowship, you're looking for EJW or Skadden funding, et cetera, you need to partner with an organization. And you need to know what they do and who they are, so that you can do more research. Have they had fellows before? What type of work are they doing? What type of projects? For instance, EJW, what matches up with the issues that will probably get funded for this year? Who does that and where do they do it? And sometimes you'll see even for EJW, you see, sorry, I'm stealing your thunder, you'll see geographic areas, right? So who does, I don't know, make something up. Who does environmental law in Washington State, right? This is going to give you that information, and then that's going to help you drill it down until you get to a position where you feel confident about the type of information that you have, and you can make really smart decisions about who you want to target. You can come at them saying, I know you do this, and I know you've had a position here, and I know you've brought on staff here, and that sort of thing. Okay? Don't want to overwhelm you guys too much at this point because you're about to get some really good, solid information on each of the programs. But are there any questions right now generally about fellowships or specifically about PSJD? Because I'm so awesome I dazzled you. Okay, perfect.
Then I am going to get rid of this and switch over to, what do I need next, Nancy? Okay.
While they're changing the screen behind
Okay,
us,
thank you.
I also want to
I can
tell
barely
you
see that.
About a
there we
loan
go.
repayment. Is that of interest to anyone in the room? There are two ways to find out about that. One is on the summer public interest programming for law students in Washington, D.C. on July 18th.
Thank you,
Is
lady.
a practicing public interest law east of the Anacostia River, which will include somebody from the DC Bar Foundation named Imoni Washington, and she'll talk to you about the LRAP programs here in DC. But if you can't wait that long or you have conflict that day, today from the DC Bar Foundation is Christina Lynch, who's sitting down here, and she may have spoken to some of you earlier. She brought some handouts, and she'll be happy to talk with you when the program is over if you want to get just some nuts and bolts basics about the LRAP programs and how that works here in DC. So take advantage of that opportunity as well. So now, I'm going to soon hand it over to David Steib, who is our moderator for the evening. David is a graduate of Yale University and Georgetown Law Center. He is currently at American University Washington College of Law in the Office of Public Interest, but soon to be a language access coordinator at AYUDA here in DC. He is also a co-chair of the membership committee at the Board of Directors of Washington Council of Lawyers, and from there he will tell you about all the other fine folks who are here. So thank you so much for being with us, and I'll hand it over to David.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. I just, really quickly, I wanted to kind of gauge who's in the room. So can you raise your hand if you're a rising 2L? Awesome. Never too early to start thinking about these things. And rising 3Ls? Awesome. It's about 50-50. That's great. And so for you guys, it's like very pertinent information that you need, right now. So that's great that you're here. And are there any recent graduates in the room? Folks who have already graduated from law school and looking to apply for fellowships? Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everyone. How many of you guys are from outside of DC? Okay. And going to law school here in DC? Good, great. We have a nice mix of people. So I'm not going to spend much time sort of introducing the panel because, sorry, there's one more question I had. How many of you have been on PSJD before? Good answer. Yeah, no, PSJD is a lifeline. I hope you're all using it. You can do a job search and then you can essentially save that search as an alert, and PSJD will email you whenever a job fitting your criteria comes across, its website. So it's a really great resource for so many reasons. So, I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing the panelists just because you do have their bios in the program. So, you take those with you, make sure you know who all these folks are, and I'm sure many of them would be willing to speak with you afterwards. But I do just kind of want to run down really quickly the order in which that they're going to do their presentations, and just a little bit about what they're going to talk about, just to sort of orient you as to how they fit into the world of postgraduate fellowships. So we have Sterling Morris with us. She's from Equal Justice Works. She's going to speak first. She has a PowerPoint. And as hopefully all of you know, the Equal Justice Works Fellowship, there's a postgraduate fellowship that funds many fellows every year. And that application just recently opened, right? They put it up, I think, on Monday. So that is now available. And she's going to talk to you guys a little bit about that process of applying for that fellowship and what it means to receive the fellowship. After that, we're going to hear from Evan Henley. And Evan is a Skadden Fellow at the Legal Aid Society of DC. So he very recently went through the application process for the Skadden Foundation Fellowship. And that application is also available, and that one is due in October, and the Equal Justice Works Fellowship is due in September. So those are upcoming deadlines. After Evan sort of orients us on the Skadden, we're going to move to Vytas Vergeer, and Vytas is the legal director at Bread for the City, a nonprofit here in DC. And, Vytas is going to kind of give us the perspective of the host organization, right? What does he look for when he's choosing a candidate to put forward for a project-based fellowship? And what is the process that Bread for the City uses to choose their candidates? And then last but not least, we're going to hear from Ashley Fox, and she is going to talk to us a little bit about one of the programs that Christina just pointed out, which was the Presidential Management Fellows. So the PMF program and also the Pathways program, and talk a little bit about the idea of a government fellowship or working for the government. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Sterling.
Hi, everyone. As Dave said, my name is Sterling Morris. I'm a manager of fellowships, I'm a manager on the Fellowships and Advancement Unit at Equal Justice Works, and I've been at Equal Justice Works for coming up on my 3-year anniversary. I am a proud graduate of this law center right here, Georgetown. I graduated in 2011 and actually found my calling in fundraising of all things, and wanted to run away from practicing, and found this fantastic organization as a way to still continue to work in public interest. And I get to work on an absolutely fantastic, amazing program that is the Equal Justice Works Fellowship Program. So today we're going to talk, I'm going to focus the next 10, 12 minutes probably on the private fellowship program, which is our project-based fellowship, but I do want to, if there's time, go into a little bit of our AmeriCorps program, which is another fellowship program we have, and I also want to highlight the fact that we have an amazing conference and career fair that you should all come to. So the best way that I can explain what an Equal Justice Works Fellowship is, well, there's a very similar type of person sitting right next to me, which Evan you'll hear all about his project, but I wanted to tell about a specific fellow. So behind me, there's a picture of Catherine Cliff. Catherine is a 2012 fellow, so she started in September 2012, and I love her project. So she's working up in the Bronx, and in New York City, it's the only jurisdiction in the entire U.S. where you actually have a right to shelter if you're homeless. Like you have the ability, no matter what, to walk off the street and walk into a shelter, and the city of New York has to give you a bed. That only counts if you're a single person walking off the street. You don't have to prove anything, you don't have to anything. You can just walk in and say, hi, I'm homeless. However, there's a loophole, and Catherine saw this loophole and was like, I need to help, I need to do something about it. The loophole is, if you're a family, you have to prove it. And the documentation is it's a really high burden to prove, because you have to prove that you don't have a single place to sleep for even one night. And so Catherine saw this because she had been working at Legal Aid Society on homelessness issues, and she's like, I want to create a fellowship around this. And she is the only person in all of New York, and therefore in the entire U.S. working on this issue, which is she's advising homeless families every night about their options and trying to stand in the gap and get them in an actual home or an actual shelter for the night. I'm proud to say she's 22 months into her fellowship, and she has advised over 500 families at this point. That's families. That means 2,500 people probably. And she's directly represented over 80 families to actually get into shelters, all with positive outcomes. So I'm really proud of her. I think it's a great example of what a fellowship can do, and what you guys sitting in the audience could do 3 years from now. You could be a Catherine Cliff at the end of your fellowship. So she is at Legal Aid Society in New York. That is her host organization, the nonprofit that decided to partner with her. And I wanted to point out that she's funded by KPMG and Sidley Austin law firm. So basically, you have a big corporation and a law firm coming together to choose this particular project, which we'll get into. So what are Equal Justice Works Fellowships? We are the largest postgraduate fellowship program. We had 57 fellows start in this past September. We're going to have 61 starting this September 2014. And our goal for next year is to get 65 fellows in the field. They are project-based fellowships. That means that the organization isn't just hiring you for 2 years to be a staff attorney. They're entrepreneurial, and it's something that the candidate themselves kind of dreams up. And the whole point of what we're doing is to increase access to justice, and we do this by creating this partnership. We have the nonprofit, we have the actual public interest attorney, the young law school graduate, and then we have the resources of the private bar, as in the funders. And that's what I focused most of my time and energy on, is going out to these, to the law firms and to the corporations and the bar foundations and convince them to fund more. So what do you get when you're an Equal Justice Works Fellow? We have a salary, a set salary, and the reason why there's an asterisk next to the $41,000 is we will provide, as Equal Justice Works, up to $41,000 towards your host organization's salary. The organizations themselves, when they sign on to host you as a fellow, they agree to pay all of your benefits, and they agree to pay you whatever an incoming brand new staff attorney would get at that organization. Sometimes that's higher than 41, sometimes that's lower. If it's lower, we will only give the organization $37,000, for example. If it's higher, we're capping our payment at 41, but the organization then has to come up with the gap. Generally, if you're looking at a big city, bigger, more established organizations, you're going to be at the 41 level or higher, especially like in New York and DC. So the organization then covers your healthcare and other fringe benefits. And then we actually have our own LRAP program where we repay loans during the course of your 2-year fellowship. And we actually also do a training once a year, every October. All Equal Justice Works Fellows come together here in DC, and we time it with our big annual dinner and with our conference and career fair. And so like all of Equal Justice Works is in the same place at the same time, and it's a lot of fun. But we do leadership training there, and so it's not substantive because our fellows work on a bazillion different issues, but it's really good leadership training and networking, because you get all of the fellows in the same place. And we have an amazing active alumni network of over 1,000 fellows now. So there, like with Catherine Cliff's fellowship, there are 4 components. You've got the candidate, the person, the project, what they want to do. You have the nonprofit, the host, and you have the sponsor that contributes the funding. So a little bit about the candidate. The candidate has to be a student or a graduate of an Equal Justice Works member law school. Now, I can almost, like 99% guarantee that if you're in this room at law school, you are at an Equal Justice Works member law school, because we have, I want to say 99.9% of all the law schools are members of ours. But you can double check on our website to make sure that yours is a member. To be eligible to be the host organization, you just have to be a not-for-profit. Anything from law school clinics to actual 501c3s. We've kind of had a little bit of everything. And you just have to prove that you have the capacity to provide supervision and support. I think Skadden's fellowship has a 2-attorney rule. Like the staff has to have, there have to be at least 2 attorneys on staff before the fellow gets there. We don't have that rule, but generally and with everything, keep in mind that you're trying to convince somebody else to fund you. You're trying to convince, the private sector to fund your project. So if you go in saying, I want to be the first attorney at a brand new organization, people probably aren't going to buy into that no matter how amazing you are, because you do need supervision and support. So actually applying, you yourself are the one. Again, this is entrepreneurial. Like our applications, I liken them when I'm on the road pitching this project, this program, I liken them to business plans, because it's not just, hey, I'm going to go work for 2 years, and I'm going to, you know, help every person that comes in the door with this particular issue. It's not that. It's actually, you're trying to find a legal need that needs to be addressed, or maybe like a client population that hasn't been hasn't been addressed yet. There's like maybe a niche need, and you're finding the way to get to them, or you're expanding your organization's advocacy. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. That's why really the sky's the limit. Like you be creative. You know, the best applications really are handling legal problems in creative ways. But we suggest that you explore potential host organizations very early. You will work on the application. So if you're graduating and you want to immediately go into a fellowship, you'll be applying the summer before your 3L year. So Dave was just saying that our application opened this Monday. It closes in September, which I'll get to the date. I think it's the 17th. So this is the summer to be developing it if you want to start in the fall of 2015. So you need to have a relationship with an organization that's willing to say, I want to host this person. Because they're signing on to you, the project, and they're certifying that they're going to be your employer for 2 years.
Can I just mention something really quickly?
please.
Another thing is that on PSJD, you can search for fellowship sponsor, and there are many organizations that are looking for candidates to put forth for project-based fellowships.
Yep.
So even if you don't have an existing relationship with a sponsor, you could apply to be their candidate.
Yep.
That's another option.
Yes, some of the bigger organizations do that, where they actually hold their own selection process before they even put in an application to us. So there's a lot of different ways that applications come together. Sometimes it's just a very natural thing that happens where, you have an intern who they worked at a legal organization their 1L summer and they really got to know everyone, and then their 2L summer they saw a need and they started, formulating something, and together they came up. Or you have a situation where the organization says, we really want to expand in this specific way. We want to find someone who's uniquely qualified to expand us in that way. So it comes about a lot of different ways. And then you would draft the proposal the summer before your 3L year, and then you submit everything online. And then what we do is, I think I missed that. What we do is then we review the applications. We have a big list we do it internally with the staff, but also we use all of our former fellows. They're kind of our first reviewers. And it's judged on the quality of the project, the quality of the candidate, and the quality of the host organization. So those are the three, which we'll get to that. And then at the same time, we're securing sponsors. Like I'm out on the road getting new fellowship sponsors, and I do that all throughout the entire calendar year. Right now, our application just opened, and we have only a third of that 65 fellowship goal that I was telling you guys secured. When it closes in September, we'll have maybe a half or 2/3. Like we continue securing sponsors while we're already selecting like existing sponsors, fellows, if that makes any sense. So it's 100% a rolling basis, because our mantra is as many of these as we can get. If that means waiting, and if that means continuing to enroll sponsors after a specific date, we will do it. And the interviews then begin a couple of weeks after the applications are due in mid-September, or we have a turnaround, so it's actually late October. The interviews begin, and they really do continue to at least March. We try to let candidates go as we see there's less likelihood that a funder's going to come in looking in Iowa, so we let all the Iowa candidates go, that sort of thing. We do that on a rolling basis throughout the year. Because the last thing we want is for people to still have this hope, that there's this application still out there. So that just kind of depends. Let's see what we have here. The sponsors. So I was saying a little bit earlier, if I can impart anything in you, one thing rather in you, think about the sponsors. I mean, it kind of stinks that this is the way that it's formulated, but it is. We're trying to utilize the resources of the private bar here. And so they will tell us, listen, I'm interested, I'm MetLife Corporation, and I'm headquartered in New York, and my big focus is women and children. I want to help women and children. So they'll tell us we want someone in New York, and we want, someone who's going to be helping youth or women. So we will pull all the applications that are high scoring in New York, maybe domestic violence projects, maybe some special immigrant juvenile status projects, all of that. Like that's our process. They'll tell us what we want. And then when they actually are in there in the interview room, it's almost like picking a scholarship candidate, right? They interview anywhere between 3 to 5, and they'll choose the one person that they want. And I will say that the ones that are the most successful are the ones that really think about, how to answer that question. Why should this corporation or this law firm invest in me and invest in my project? It's not investing in your host organization. It's not investing in this issue area. It's you and the project that you've come up with. And so really how to sell that. And that's why I call the application a business plan, is for that reason. Nope, I'm not moving. Nope, there. So some hot topics that are out there that in the past couple of years we see getting funded very often include immigration. Well, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of movement in that issue right now. Medical legal partnerships. We're seeing a lot of people funding access to healthcare issues generally. We have a lot of people, especially after the ACA was implemented, a lot of projects that came about because of that. Trafficking is always big, education issues, school to prison pipeline, that sort of thing, always big. And then veterans. The good and the bad thing is, well, I think it's a good thing. We actually have funders from all over the political spectrum. We have funders who only want to work on really nitty gritty, criminal justice, like people coming out of prison and helping them reentry and, help reenter into society and all of that. But then we have other people, for example, News Corps is actually a sponsor of ours. Rupert Murdoch himself is sponsoring one of our fellowships, and it's based on veterans. And the way that we see it is that's awesome. Somebody is out there funding this. We're using their money for good, So, whoops. So we love it, but, and it gets, it's more people being funded. So we can't complain. But if you look on our website, which I'll show you guys at the end, how to get onto our website, you can actually see, we'll put up specific sponsor preferences. As we're out on the road and securing sponsors, they will tell us, I'm looking in this particular area. One of my favorites was I had to do all of this outreach a couple of summers ago because John Deere wanted to sponsor. And I'm like, great, you want someone in Iowa, okay? Like, how am I gonna do this, So we that's a lot of my job, is making sure that we get applications that fit what the sponsors are looking for. Let's see. So this is just reiterating what I was talking earlier about letting really focusing on how a sponsor wants to invest in you as a person and as a project. Like, define the specific need that you're trying to address. Don't make this some pie in the sky project. Like, I'm going to help every special education student in DC's public schools. No, like tailor it. We have a fellowship project right now at Children's Law Center, somebody who's creating the first bullying information for kids who have been bullied, and they're in special education and they have special needs, and nobody's ever focused on that particular population. You could be the first person to focus on that. That's an example of how to tailor. And what I was saying earlier about thinking about addressing a problem in a novel way. Maybe you need to set up a mobile legal clinic and you go to where the clients are, for example. Think about sustainability. It's a hallmark of our program that most of our fellowship programs continue on, because it's, even if the person leaves or even after the 2 years, you're creating something new that's going to stay, and you can even maybe hopefully replicate it at other places. And then just think creatively about your potential sponsor. Think about ways that they could get involved in your project and they could really have buy-in, especially if you have any experience with pro bono or your organization does. You can come up with, I'm going to go help veterans with their disability claims, and I'm going to set up clinics that, my sponsor, Northrop Grumman, can come in, once every 3 months, and I'll have 10 veterans for 10 of their volunteers to serve in an afternoon. That's the sort of thing that sponsors really like to see, and like to see that thought out. Scoring, I mentioned earlier the things that they look at. Project, candidate, and host organization. So those are the 3 areas that they're looking at. I'm trying to go quickly, guys, sorry.
15 minutes are almost up.
All right, so application, it opened on Monday, and it closes September 17th. That's the big day. And I want to highlight, I don't know if you can see down here, but we have application webinars, so we'll get into a lot more nitty-gritty than I am. July 16th, next week at 2 p.m., and you can sign up for that on our website, equaljusticeworks.org, which I'll get to. Another one on August 13th at 2 p.m. This is telling you to be sure to go to our website, which I'm about to do. And then the only other thing I really want to highlight, because I don't think I have time to talk about AmeriCorps right now, is we have a conference and career fair that is October 24th and 25th of this year. It is here in the DC area. But if there's any way you can make it, I highly recommend it, because we actually ran some numbers. Last year we had 120 employers, and for every employer that was there were 6 opportunities, 6 openings that they were hiring for, and six people that even got hired from that particular job fair. So that's a lot of jobs. And granted, some of them are summer internships. I'm not talking all full-time postgraduate employment. But that is a lot of jobs that are created at our conference and career fair. So I highly recommend that you come. And then let's see if I can get this to work so I can show you guys the website. So this is our website. It's just equaljusticeworks.org. For all the information about fellowships, you're going to go to the postgrad tab, and you're going to go, the AmeriCorps fellowship information is the first one, which I highly recommend, especially if you've already graduated. They're placing people right now to start this fall. And they're going to be working on access to employment, like barriers to employment, so like trying to help people expunge criminal records, that sort of thing. But right underneath there, it says Equal Justice Works Fellowships. And all sorts of information. You've got, I want to learn more, I want to apply, maybe. You can actually even access the application here. You can set up your user login, all of that. And then here, right here, webinars. So yeah, everything's right here on our website. I highly recommend, and I'll be around for questions. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and hold the questions till the end, but there'll definitely be room at the end of the presentation to ask everybody questions. So if you do have questions, make sure to write them down and keep them in mind. So, a lot of people, when they're applying for project-based fellowships, they will apply for both the Equal Justice Works Fellowship and the Skadden Fellowship. It's possible to do that. And, conveniently, the deadlines are staggered a little bit for turning in the applications. So I want to move now to Evan to tell us a little bit about the Skadden Foundation Fellowship.
Hi everyone, my name's Evan Henley. I'm a Skadden Fellow at Legal Aid Society here in DC. I see some familiar faces, so I'm glad that you all came out. Thanks for having me. Just to start out, I'll give a little bit of an overview of the Skadden Fellowship and distinguish it in a few ways from the Equal Justice Works Fellowship. And then I'll talk a little bit about my own experience applying for the Skadden Fellowship and some tips I have. Of course, when I talk about what I think the Skadden Fellowship is looking for, that's what I think, and so that's a disclaimer. I could be wrong, but it's based on my experience and the experience of some friends I have who have also applied. Like Equal Justice Works, the Skadden Fellowship is a 2-year project-based fellowship, which basically means that you work with an organization to create a project that's aimed at addressing an unmet legal need. Unlike the Equal Justice Works Foundation, the Equal Justice Works, the Skadden Foundation is the entity that both selects and funds the Skadden Fellows. So it's all contained within the Skadden Foundation rather than with Equal Justice Works, where Equal Justice Works acts in some ways as a broker intermediary between funders and the fellows. Another difference is that the Skadden Fellowship has pretty rigid dates in terms of its selection. The first date is October 6th, which is when the application is due. After that, the Skadden Foundation selects 100 people to interview. Those interviews generally take place around Halloween. Out of that, they select 54 semifinalists who are notified in November. And then there's a meeting of the Board of Trustees of the foundation on December 4th this year. And then the fellows are notified the next day. And the people who unfortunately were not selected are also notified that day. Generally, the Skadden Foundation funds 25 to 30 fellowships depending on the funding that year. 25 is the baseline, but sometimes they add more if the trustees decide to contribute additional funds to select another fellow. So in the application process, the first step is identifying an organization and also identifying an issue. I don't think that it's necessary to pick one or the other first. One could lead to the other. In order to do that, first you need to have a general idea at least of what issues you're interested in and what type of organization you want to work with. For me, I interned at Legal Aid Society after my second year and then found out they were sponsoring a fellow, and they wanted to actually sponsor a fellow to work on a project that I had some experience with as an intern. So there it was pretty straightforward that the organization had an issue area that they wanted to address and were recruiting a fellow for that. And so I had to go through an application process with them, which took a few weeks. And at the end, I was notified that they had selected me, and then I applied for the fellowship with them. As Sterling was saying, other times you might just find an organization who wants a fellow whom you have experience with or whom you connect with through another source, and you tell them that you're interested and you have this project idea, and they might just be willing to select you as a fellow without some sort of formal process. In order to find an organization, I think the first place to start is with organizations you are interning with or have interned with. Talk to them, see if they're sponsoring a fellow, or are they thinking about sponsoring a fellow? And if they're not, ask them if they have any ideas of other organizations whom you can talk to, because those conversations will give you a whole host of connections, but also will allow you to develop perhaps an idea of a fellowship project that you have, and you can talk with them and see if they can think of ways to improve it. And I'll talk more about the potential projects in just a bit. Another thing that I would definitely suggest you do is talk to your school's public interest advisor or career services advisor, because they can connect you with people who have done fellowships in the past or who are working at organizations in the areas that you have interested in. And I'm sure that pretty much anybody you contact would be willing to take time and talk to you about what opportunities might be out there or about a fellowship idea that you might have. I also definitely suggest looking on PSJD, which I think is a great resource. Another great thing, we can look at the Skadden website in a little bit, is that they actually have drop-down lists of fellows, organizations, and law schools for every year that the fellowship has existed. And so it's a little hard to search because you have to go year by year and you can't just do a global search, but you can go and see, okay, what fellows went to my law school, or what fellows are in the city I want to go to, or what fellows were at organizations or are at organizations that I'm interested in working with. Okay, to talk a little bit about what a project looks like. Essentially, a project is generally based on addressing a legal right that currently is not being vindicated in the way that it should. This could be for a whole host of reasons. It could be because the legal framework surrounding it is not being utilized properly. It could be because of geographic or linguistic isolation, or some other forces that are marginalizing certain populations, and therefore they're not able to vindicate their rights like they want to. For example, David's project was based mainly on trying to work with Spanish-speaking tenants in DC who had rights as tenants, but because they were isolated in certain ways, were not being able to vindicate these rights like they should. So you might have an idea about a legal need like that based on your own experience as an intern, Or you might be able to just talk to an organization and say, hey, I'm interested in working in housing in New York City. What sort of ideas do you have about things that need to be done? Before you have that conversation, obviously I would suggest you do some research into what's going on in that area or with a certain population if that's what you intend to do, so you can speak knowledgeably about it with the people whom you're talking to. Also, in terms of the organization, as I said before, some organizations will have a really discrete project idea. Others will be open to you presenting that yourself. Either way, when it comes to making the application, if the organization does sponsor you, you're going to be in the driver's seat. Even though with my organization, they said, we want to have a project that's aimed at representing tenants in what's called the housing conditions calendar here in DC, where tenants can sue their landlords for repairs. That was basically it. I had some experience with the court in the past, so I had my own ideas, but it was up to me to say, okay, these are the ways that these are the strategies I'm going to use to represent the tenants. These are the 4 or 5 main changes that I want to see in the court. And this is sort of the timetable that I'm going to go through as I try to make this project a success. Also, when you're trying to develop the project, even though it generally is about vindicating these legal rights, usually with the Skadden Foundation, they like to see some kind of combination of direct representation or litigation, advocacy, so you're not just working with the specific people who are your clients, but you're also trying to change the system in some way to make it easier for people like them to vindicate their rights in the future. And community outreach, because you need to be able to find your clients first of all, but you also want to give information to people so that they perhaps can spot the problem in the future that they might not otherwise know they have. Okay, what Skadden's looking for on their site, they say that there are 3 main things they look at with regards to a candidate, and that's the applicant's academic performance, number 1. I will say that's slightly different than the Equal Justice Works Foundation, or actually not slightly, greatly different, because Equal Justice Works doesn't ask for your GPA on the application, while Skadden does. I don't think that should dissuade anybody from applying for Skadden. You don't have to be on the dean's list by any means to get a fellowship, but it is something that they ask about. They also want to see a demonstrated commitment to the public interest. I will note that this doesn't necessarily have to be in the same issue area as what your project is. You just want to show that your life leading up to that point has been marked with a dedication to public interest, that you are passionate and committed about the type of work you're doing, because what they don't want to do is give someone a Skadden fellowship who then thinks that's a springboard to working for the Skadden law firm, for example. They want someone who is either going to stay at the same organization or keep doing the same kind of work and will be a leader in the public interest field in the future. And then the third thing is the quality of his or her project. So they are looking for projects that meet and fill a currently unmet need. They don't want you just to be another staff attorney at your organization, even though that might be essentially what happens. They want you to add to the capacity of the organization in a sustainable way, that even if your current duties are similar to staff attorney, they want you to be doing something different that expands the capacity of organization. With the application process, there are 3 questions. One is, what is your project and what are you going to do to make it a success? Number 2 is to talk about some public interest projects you've had in the past, and you want to present them obviously in a way that shows that you're a person who's poised to make your current project a success. And number 3, what does public interest mean to me? And so I would use those to try to create a cohesive narrative that presents yourself as a person who is passionate about the issue, and also as someone who's going to dedicate your life to the public interest and sees the fellowship, as I said, as a springboard to that. Then if you're selected for an interview, which you hopefully all are, those are the same points that you want to hit in the interview. You want to just really let your passion shine. You also want to be able to talk really concretely about your project. The Skadden application doesn't require the same amount of detail as Equal Justice Works, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't know all those details, because you could easily get a question about it. And so with that, the main things I think you want to be able to talk about are, who are your clients? Talk about how you'll find them, how you're going to be able to communicate with them, and how you're going to be able to work with them to address their legal needs. So if, for example, your project is based on working with people who have mental health issues or who are survivors of domestic violence or other trauma, you were going to want to show that either you have experience working with people in those situations and have the ability to communicate well with them, because otherwise they could see it as a barrier to your project being a success. You also should try to identify the greatest obstacle to your project's success. What barrier is going to be thrown in front of you that can keep you from doing it? For mine, they were concerned about the sort of court reform aspect of it, and so I talked about how the litigation itself can act as a lever for court reform, and it doesn't necessarily have to be outside advocacy. So be prepared to address a question like that and practice with your friends, colleagues, and other people before, so you can try to get some of these questions out. And also talk about how your organization will help you succeed. They are concerned about an organization that is going to be a great place for you to grow, because, let's be honest, even if you have a great project idea, when you're straight out of law school or straight out of a clerkship, you're not going to really know what the hell you're doing. So you need someone who can be with you for the first steps of that process. And then, as I said before, show that you're passionate, that this is work that you want to do even if you don't get the fellowship, that if you don't get it, you're going to apply for organizations throughout the city doing the same thing, or throughout the country, even if it's more the issue area that drives you. And continue the narrative that you developed in your application materials. And finally, I'll say that, as David alluded to, most people do apply for Equal Justice Works in Skadden. I definitely suggest that you do so as well. Your organization will probably want you to do so. The Equal Justice Works application is first, so getting all that detail out will help you to have a stronger Skadden application as well. Finally, even though EJW might be tied to more sponsors with geographic preferences, I will say that Skadden also too tends to fund people in major urban areas where they have offices, so there may be some more geographic flexibility, but it is limited sometimes in that way as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One thing I would add is that if you're, especially for the rising 3Ls in the room, if you're putting your project together right now, and for the 2Ls next summer, when you're putting your project together, one thing you might want to do as far as the Skadden Foundation Fellowship is concerned is to call Susan Butler-Plum, who's the director of the foundation, and just kind of run things by her. You know, like if you're in the process of choosing who your host will be, then you might want to call Susan Butler-Plum and see if that's a host that, you know, Skadden has had a fellow there in the past, or, you know, if it's an appropriate sponsor, and she can tell you if she has any concerns. And then she can also kind of give you feedback on your project proposal, whether it's too broad or whether it's you know, not an area that they'll fund. You know, for instance, like if you did a purely environmental project, Skadden's not going to fund that. They're more interested in alleviating poverty. Now, if it's a project about like making public housing more environmentally sound, because that's going to offer you know, more public housing for more individuals, then maybe that's a bent that you could take. So she can advise you on stuff like that. That's one thing I would mention. Yeah. And the other thing I would mention is, if there's one thing I would tell you to take away from the process of putting together your applications for EJW and Skadden, is make sure that you really investigate the need, and that you can show the need, and that you have the statistics and the numbers, and that you can put that in your application, because that's going to make it more compelling. But I don't want to take too much time, because I know everyone has a strict time limit and I don't want to run over. But like I said, there will definitely be time for questions at the end. So now I'd like to move on to Vytas.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out. So my name is Vytas Vergeer. I haven't seen the lovely bio that they put in your materials, but they rejected the one that I usually use, which is pretty strange. So I keep getting invited to these things, and I think it's because hopefully I'm entertaining and informative, but I'm also mildly outspoken and usually go off the beaten path, so maybe that's useful. I've been at Bread for the City since the fall of 1994. I've been the legal clinic director there for, I don't know, since 1999. And somehow, I mean, I was the first staff attorney there. There were two attorneys when I was a legal director, and then me as the first real staff attorney. And I was just sort of playing this game this afternoon, and now, since then, we've had, I count, 11 different fellowships that would fall within this. So basically, since I started to now, we've always had some kind of fellow with the 2-year thing. We've had EJWs. We stumbled into a Skadden. We've had a fellowship sponsored by Georgetown Women's Public Policy Fellow for a year. We had someone sponsored by their law school, like a UVA fellowship. So we've had a lot of different, we've had at least 4 different kinds of fellowships. I won't even get into, sometimes firms do sort of little 2-month things, and there are other things that aren't really the subject of tonight. But we've had them all. And we're not, I mean, this is sort of Bread for the City, or maybe more my own characteristic. We're not all that organized. And we haven't had to go seek out people. We haven't had to advertise, and we have these meetings. I meet with the sort of the supervisors of our various practice areas and figure out what we're going to do. But we currently have a fellow, Taylor Healy, with Equal Justice Works, who's just awesome and is going to stay on. She's just expiring in August, but we're going to keep her, which happens, and I'll talk about that later. Yeah, I like to use interesting terminology if I can. But we had sat down, sort of the important people at Bread, and said, all right, are we together enough to have a fellow next year, whenever it is? What are we going to do? And we had our meeting, and we walked out of the meeting saying, you know what? No, we need a break. We had some personnel changes. We were trying to sort of steady the ship, and we said, no, forget it. Next year, maybe we'll apply. This year, we're out. And then Taylor came in with her project, and we looked at it, and we went, wow, this is like exactly what we've wanted to do for the last 5 years. She's awesome. And we said, all right, screw the meeting. We'll go try to get Taylor. And then we got her. And now hopefully she will stay with us for a long time because she's been great. So as much as there are obviously formal processes you have to go through and get it right, virtually all of our fellows were, some of them I'm trying to look through, I actually listed them all here. I'm looking, and actually one was a law clerk. So there aren't that many who were law clerks with us, but mostly it was people coming to us saying, hey, would you like to sponsor a fellowship next year? Many or most had some idea of a project, but it wasn't really fully formulated. So as much as Evan says you're in the driver's seat or whatever, we're in the driver's seat together. And if we were intrigued by the person, I mean, our process, as far as I ever have a process, would be to sit down, meet with the candidate if it's somebody who's coming out of the blue, and we always get them at the last minute, and I'm a perfect person for that, because I'm like, sure, we'll whip together a proposal, it'll be done next week, and we'll go for it, and then we keep getting them, so I don't learn from my mistakes. But we will sit down, and they'll have some half or mostly asked project that doesn't quite fit in with what we need, and then we'll work with them to develop something that we think will actually be good for our organization and good for our clients, and that we think this person can do. And it's a give and take. We'll ask them we'll sit down and have a meeting, tell them some of the stuff we think will work with whatever parameters they gave us originally. Then they'll give us a draft, and we'll say, oh, that's cute, that's terrible, and we'll send it back to them, and they'll keep working back and forth until we have something that we think will work. And believe it or not, that's been greatly successful for us. I mean, again, we stumbled into a Skadden whose sponsor organization fell through after a year. Originally was our very first fellow when we had only 2 lawyers, and Skadden was looking around saying, we need to put her somewhere. We don't want her to just be fellowshipless at this point. Will you take her? And we did, and then they loved us for that, so we've kept a good relationship with them and had, I think, 2 other Skaddens. I kind of forget whether they're Skadden or EJW after a while. They're all just great lawyers who came to work for us. But the point is, someone comes to me and says, essentially, hi, I have some qualifications and I want to be a free lawyer for your organization. Will you work with me? I'll usually say yes. All right, it's not a real hard sell. We don't have a ton of money. We can't hire tons of people. We're much bigger now. We have 15 lawyers, but a couple of those have been from fellowships that stayed on. So we are thinking, again, I think this year we made the decision again that we're not going to get anyone next year. We've had a lot of personnel decisions recently, changes recently. In fact, I'm going to leave the organization in a month myself. So who knows? It'll probably be all more dignified and organized after this. And I think what we're going to do is actually advertise soon to say that we kind of put in a request for proposals, that here are a few things that we're interested in. Would you be interested in coming to work with us with that kind of project? And then again, working with somebody to craft something to put the proposal into EJW or to Skadden, or we haven't done Soros, but anything else, or again, some of the law schools have their own fellowships. We have a preference for the 2-year fellowships, Skadden and EJW. The one we got from the Women's Public Policy and the UVA one were each 1 year, which is a little harder because it takes, first of all, we got to wait until you're barred, and then it takes you a while to know even close to what the hell you're doing. And then it's that second year when things tend to get going. But we'll look at anything, and we always have. I do think, even though I said only one of them was a law clerk in the past, being an intern or a law clerk is a decided advantage. I think it helps. We've got people who we've talked to about, and we've done applications. We haven't been 100% successful. We've lost a few, but with our interns and law clerks and did those applications because we wanted them and we knew them and we already knew they were great. And if we can expand that way with someone who's already there doing the work, that always works. So it's a decided advantage. I got to say, it slowed down a little bit, but for a while it was hot. About once a month, some random unemployed future public interest lawyer will call me and say, hey, can you tell me about public interest law? And then I'll meet them for lunch, and then I'll buy their lunch because they're still unemployed, and I'm a rich legal clinic director. And we'll talk about how to get into public interest law. And one of the first things I'll say is try to get into a fellowship. And even though they've already graduated, even if it means you got to go be a contract lawyer at some firm and do horrible document review for however long it is, and you have to wait a year because it's tough. I'm not going to bluff you here, but that fellowship is really an opening to getting a job in public interest, either at the place you ended up working or even some other place. But while there weren't a lot of law clerks, I'm looking through the 11 at least that I could name. Again, Taylor is staying on. We had someone named Stacy who stayed on for a couple of years, and then 3 years, I think, and moved on to something else. That original Skadden orphan that we got stayed on for years. Carrie O'Brien came to us through Equal Justice Works, and that's another thing. Don't be too shy about coming up with a project that you think is needed and then finding an organization that at least is in the ballpark but might not be a perfect fit. Carrie O'Brien was a great example, one of our early fellows. We do, I don't know how much you know about Bread for the City, we do all sorts of stuff, which I think is why fellowship sponsoring organizations like us, because we have a food program and medical and social services and legal all under one roof, so we're really cool. But aside from the coolness factor, someone came to us in the legal clinic, Carrie O'Brien, and said, hey, would you like an employment lawyer? Because that was one of the big gaps that we noticed just in the community. We do landlord-tenant, we do family law, we do disability and public benefit stuff, but there was really no one in the city doing employment law. And she said, would you like someone to come in and just do employment law?
She's now our director of AmeriCorps programs.
There you go. And we said, sure, we know nothing about employment law whatsoever. But I'm an experienced litigator. I'll go with you and learn along with you. And somehow we were able to convince Equal Justice Works that was an okay supervisory situation. So she taught me employment law, and then I supervised her on it. I mean, I could tell her stuff about clients, but how to deal with situations and litigation in general, but I didn't know substantive law. But she came in and did that project with us for 2 years, and it was great. And then she actually...
The substantive law is so little of it, really.
Yeah.
So...
She got a Soros, right?
And then she got was it a Soros or an Echo and Green?
Echo and Green.
I think it was Echo and Green, actually. I wrote it down when I saw this. So she, with another Judy Conti, someone else, got an Echo and Green to stay with us for a little bit longer. And then we extended her time for like 6 months. And then she founded an organization called the Employment Justice Center, which is still really the only place in D.C. that does employment law stuff. And we still consider them our first spin-off organization in that, they created that organization, and now they do walk-in clinics, and they're hosted by Bread for the City. So tonight, actually, it's Wednesday, isn't it? It's probably just ending. They're there every Wednesday night in our Northwest office and 4 Fridays a month in our Southeast office. And the thing about Carrie, one of the other things I think I was supposed to talk about is, what I'm looking for when people come in, because I've said it's not all law clerks, they're random people who come in. And I think Evan touched on it, and everyone will probably touch on it. I mean, I'm really looking for someone who's demonstrated an interest in doing public interest, who, I know there's only so much you could have done up to this point in law school, but who shows that that's something they care about, whether it's through volunteer work or the internships you took. Again, in law school, I just went where I was interested. So I did public defender stuff. I worked for the National Center for Law and Deafness, which I don't think exists anymore. But I just went and didn't make any money, but I went where I thought it was cool and I would enjoy it. But clearly my resume, and I could never do a fellowship, I'm just not clever enough, but it showed a real public interest background that I cared about this stuff. And that's the first thing I look to. I don't care what law school you went to very much. I'd like you to get by on the grades, but I'm not really looking at your transcript and all that stuff. I just want to make sure that you're articulate, you care about my clients. We're direct service, so some experience dealing with our clients. It's more of an art than a science. I probably can't train you how to deal with the folks I deal with all the time. Max had a fun experience with me yesterday dealing with a special client who was screaming half the time and was super grateful the rest of the day. But it's a difficult thing to learn, so I'm looking for that experience with clients and the flexibility to do that sort of stuff. And I am looking for, I guess entrepreneur would be the word, someone who is a self-starter. Carrie came in and I just knew she could do it, that I could pretend to be her supervisor, but she would go forward and figure it out and find other sources in the community to answer her actual questions and make this project go. Taylor, our current fellow, is another one. She's in an area of law that we actually know a little something about, so we can give her some information. But she's just someone who is a self-starting, go-getter kind of person. I mean, in her first month, she was trying to get candy to hand out in the area she's working to all the tenants, just to entice them and talk to her and take a survey and stuff. And she went to some presentation and they had big bowls, it was some firm, and they had big bowls of candy all over the place, and then they were left over at the end of the day. And she had the gumption to talk to the organizers and say, hey, can I have all your candy so I can give it to my clients? And she came home with a big garbage bag full of candy, and it's a stupid little thing, but it's I would have never asked that, but she got $100 worth of free candy and it saved us money. And it's those kind of little initiatives that we really need, because it's not that easy. As much as I want a free lawyer, we're always at capacity. We're always right at the top of what we can do as far as being a supervisor, and having a brand new fellow come in fresh out of law school or wherever you're from is a lot of work for us. It takes a lot. We have loaned associates from Covington and Burling, and they're great, but I have to go to court with that loaned associate just about every time for the first 6 months. And no offense, I love them all, but I don't really have time to do that. I'm supposed to be running the place and being directorial or whatever it is I am. So it's hard. So the more that we feel like you're a self-starter, and I supply all the support I can. I haven't missed a court date with our Covington fellow or any of these folks, but the more we think you can come in and you know what you're doing, and you show me and us the confidence that you're ready to make this project go, and you'll figure it out, and you'll come to us when you need the support, that really helps. Showing an enthusiasm for our organization, knowing something that's going on. No one's ever done this in a fellowship, but I get job applications that say, I want dear partner in firm or whatever. It's just no, I'm not a firm, I'm not a partner, and you don't know. And there's nothing that says that they're applying to Bread for the City. There's something that says that they're applying to a place that does law, and that's all they know. You need to get to know the organization you want to work with, talk with them, convince them that you're someone they want to put some effort into and support, and then together go to Equal Justice Works and Skadden and convince them that this is a project that they want to invest in you on, and that is going to be sustainable and important to the community. I know I was sort of on the ground floor in creating the Housing Conditions Court, and I'm really glad Evan is there to try to make that court work, because it's not working all that well. And there are gaps in there, and yes, there are the sexy projects that someone put the list on, but every now and then, if there's something where you can see that there's a need and can convince someone to say with passion. I think if I, at Bread for the City, or my attorneys write a letter to Skadden, Equal Justice Works, or a potential firm sponsor, Taylor sponsored by DLA Piper, that this is we have some credibility, believe it or not, even though I'm in charge. So this is, we tell them this is a real need, and this person is someone we believe in who can meet this need and help us fill this need in the community. That is really powerful to Equal Justice Works, to Skadden, to potential sponsors, and I think we've been able to do that and really had success in getting folks. I don't know that I have a lot more to say. I do want to say that we did, again, sort of looking through my list, Carrie, it's a great in to public interest work. Carrie stayed on and created the Employment Justice Program. Taylor's going to stay on after the end of her fellowship. Lee Goodmark, our original Skadden Fellow, stayed on for 3 years and then moved on to, I think she's at Baltimore Law School. Stacey Braverman, Stacey Cloyd, stayed on for another couple of years after her fellowship ended because, as Sterling said and Evan said, once a project is established, you're doing something that's important. We didn't just do this for fun, and we want to sustain it. And we try to find a way. We'll find the funding if we can once we realize that we've got a really good person and a really good project that's important to our clients. So that's, we're trying to find sponsors and everything for Taylor, and she's like a third paid for, but we're keeping her because she's just too good to lose at this point. And if you can get in to an organization and make yourself just invaluable, they will fight to try to keep you on. I don't know what else I want to say today. Equal Justice Fellows, it looks like the 41,000, it used to be that they were getting paid, frankly, more than from some of our other people. Now we've surpassed it, so that's good. What else did I want to say? There was at least one other thing. I'm not sure. I think that covers it, but show the passion, know your organization. Don't be afraid to come up with a different project. Don't be offended if your organization wants to tweak your project and work with you to make it something that works, but then get in there and make yourself invaluable and be great. So I really look forward to whatever, I guess I won't be doing it, but whatever new fellows come down the pike, we've had tremendous success with them, and I love these projects, and I'm really thankful to see all you come out this evening. But thanks, that's all I have for today. I'm happy to answer more questions.
Thank you, Vytas. So I know that Ashley has a PowerPoint. Before we move to that, I just wanted to mention that, while Evan was talking, I was kind of navigating around up here. This is a list of the fellows, and as Evan mentioned, there for the Skadden Foundation, past fellows, and as he mentioned, you can search by year. And then you can also go to the facts section, and you could search by law school or by sponsoring organization.
We
And
actually have
Equal
a directory
Justice
as
Works-
well.
Yeah, Equal Justice Works has a similar directory, and that's just a great resource. You can reach out to these people, as has been mentioned tonight. You can find out where they are now, reach out to them, and say, "Will you tell me a little bit about your fellowship and what you did?" And almost all of them are going to be willing to speak with you, I'm sure. Okay, so moving right along, we're going to get to Ashley's PowerPoint. And I think you can use the keyboard, right?
Okay,
Is that right?
even better. I don't want to.
I know,
Yeah,
the mouse,
it's better.
Yeah.
It's better this way. All right, so if you would bear with me as I round out the night, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about opportunities within federal service. I'll start off by talking a little bit about the Partnership for Public Service. So I am currently a program associate at the Partnership for Public Service. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit located in Metro Center. Our mission is really that good government starts with good people, and so we focus on encouraging job seekers, whether they are students who are about to graduate, or they're recent graduates, or they are coming in at the mid-career level, or they are law students who are looking for opportunities, or they're coming in at the senior level. We really encourage them to think about where they're going to be a good fit. So it sounds like some of the other fellowships are really focused on showing interest, and in federal government that's important as well, but skills and being able to demonstrate those skills is also very important, and really more important in most cases during the application process. So we can just kind of start off with talking a little bit about the hiring landscape. So lots of things happened within the federal government this year. When you think about government, what are some of the things that you might say? If I said, are you considering a job within federal government? What are some of the things that might come to mind first? Furlough. Let's be real. Okay, furlough. I'm sorry?
Freeze,
Hiring freeze, right. Okay. Anything else? All right, I'll just let it simmer in your brains. So we look at kind of what's happened in the last year. Actually, legal and what we would call what would fall under the legal and kindred occupational series, was within the top 10 new hires, or categories that had the most hires. And so currently there are over 2 million federal employees. And in 2013, there were a little bit over 76,000 people who entered, who were new hires at the entry level. So we consider entry level GS1 through GS9. How many people are familiar with the general schedule? Okay, so a pretty good number. So within government, for those who aren't familiar, there's a schedule that, so it's a pay scale, but it's also based on kind of your academic level, what degrees you hold, and what your experience is. So all that information is available on OPM's website, the Office of Personnel Management. But I also, before I forget, have a handout that is sitting over on the side. If you are exiting, you can grab a handout, and it's also sitting at the front table if you didn't catch it on your way in. So please make sure to grab that. It has a list of additional resources as well as information about the Pathways program. So we can look a little bit more in depth at kind of who's hiring. So when we're talking about, again, this legal and kindred occupational group, the VA is always one of the top hirers. We also have DOJ being a top hire. When we're looking at where people are coming from, these are people who are recently graduating from, who hold undergraduate degrees, or also people who hold law degrees. So they're coming in at the GS 7, 9, and 11 levels, which will be people, again, who are holding either undergraduate degrees, getting ready to go into a graduate program, or they have recently graduated from a graduate program. So more specifically, we're looking at health administration. So at the VA, 38%, that being a little over 1,000 people being hired. Within DOJ, Executive Office of U.S. Attorney, so a little bit over 100 there. And then within offices, boards, and divisions, 57. At the SEC, 164. And so the point here is that although furlough it was a real reality and an unfortunate reality, hiring is increasing actually, and for entry-level hires, it is increasing. Within the government, pay is also relatively competitive. So within government, there's locality pay, and so whether you're in Atlanta or if you're in San Francisco, your pay is going to fluctuate by where you are. All right, so why federal government? One of the things that we do over at the partnership is we host an award ceremony called the Service to America Medals. And so every year, we hand out awards to people in a variety of categories who are doing really interesting work within federal government. So I'd actually really encourage you to take a look at servicetoamericamedals.org and read up on some of these stories, just to get a sense of some of the lesser known stories that are happening and some of the accomplishments that people are achieving within government. But one of the things that we always like to tell people is that government is a really awesome way to make an impact on a very wide scale. And so yes, it's going to be challenging work, and federal service, or getting into federal service, is very competitive. But it's also really important that you think about kind of it holistically. So yes, there are student loan repayment programs. There are also opportunities to take flexible pay schedules, or excuse me, not pay schedules, take flexible work schedules, would be teleworking. There are a lot of different benefit opportunities, and there are also opportunities to work across a variety of areas. And so when we think about some of the skill sets, transferable skills, and also people who might be interested in pursuing something policy related, if not necessarily something within the legal avenue that would be just going straight into being an attorney, this is, again, a great opportunity and a place to consider where you might fit across a number of paths. One of the things within government is, too, once you join an agency or once you start working at an agency, a lot of people within government move around within government. And so starting off at DOJ or starting off at SEC doesn't mean you're going to end up at SEC if you don't want to, or if you're just interested in having a variety of other opportunities. All right, so I want to make sure we get to kind of the bulk of the presentation, which is USA Jobs, and also talking about PMF, the Presidential Management Fellows Program. But we can talk a little bit about how attorneys come into federal service, or who are interested in working at agencies. And so the first would be for practicing attorneys. They might come in through Schedule A. So Schedule A is a direct hiring authority. You would find out about this on agency websites. There's also USA Jobs, which would be the competitive service for non-practicing attorneys. With Schedule A, these are agencies who have already decided that they want to hire attorneys, and they're looking specifically for attorneys. So you would apply directly through the agency's website. Again, it's going to vary by agency what they're looking for and how many they're looking for. But again, this is not competitive. They know what they're looking for, and they're going to be only hiring for that. For non-practicing attorneys and those who are interested in applying via USA Jobs, this is going to be competitive service. So you're going to be applying against other attorneys, but you're also going to be applying against non-attorneys. USA Jobs is also kind of the main it's the main resume portal for a number of agencies, and on USA Jobs, there's kind of a system for you to both develop and submit a resume, which may then go to either a secondary source before getting to the agency or go directly to the agency. But again, you would develop all of your resume materials on USA Jobs. So how many people are familiar with USA Jobs, just to gauge? Okay, all the people who are raising their hands, have they also been to the USA Jobs website? Okay, great. This is good. This is a good sign. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the Pathways program. So we have Schedule A and we also have USA Jobs. But the Pathways programs specifically are unfortunately very underutilized, but a great way to enter into federal service. So it consists of 3 kind of sub-programs: the internship program, the recent graduates program, and the Presidential Management Fellows program. So kind of starting off with the internship program, this applies to current students. So current students, undergraduate or graduate level, what it is, so paid opportunities at agencies. You're going to apply, you would come in through the internship program, and at the at the end of your service, you would be eligible for a full-time conversion based on conversation that you would have formerly had with your supervisor. So again, there is going to be some fluctuation, but it's the hours that you accrue during your service, whether it's, it's paid, but it is an internship, so it does have a finite kind of time period. When you complete your service, you will be eligible, or those hours will contribute to a requirement that you would need to be converted into a full-time position. So again, those are conversations that you would be having with your supervisor ahead of time, but again, something important to note as an added benefit of participating through the Pathways program. This again applies to current students who are at qualifying institutions. So if you're at an accredited university, you pretty much qualify. The recent graduates program, so similar to the internship program, so it applies to current students who will be graduating within 6 months, but also recent graduates up to 2 years post your graduation date. So what it is, it's a developmental program. There are quite a few things that come along with it. So a number of recent graduate positions, some of them are internships, but the majority of them are full-time positions. When you come in, you'll receive 40 hours of training and development. You'll also be assigned a mentor. You go through an individual development plan, and you also have quite a few kind of professional development opportunities, and you almost come in with a little bit of a cohort. So this is a little bit more focused, again, kind of training and development program, hoping that you will stay at the agency, but much longer term and also paid. There are also opportunities through the internship and the recent graduates program to volunteer. So if you're looking for a summer opportunity, they also accept student volunteer interns, which are unpaid, but again, a great way to get a place at the agency, get the experience, establish the contacts, and then maybe be more competitive for a full-time position later on. All right, so we can keep moving forward to the Presidential Management Fellows program. And so this is really government's kind of premier fellowship program. It's very competitive, but it only applies to students who hold a graduate degree. So you would want to apply for law students, you would want to apply during your 3rd year. You would want to start completing the application at the beginning of the year. So the application opens up in October, usually kind of mid-October. And so these are, formerly you needed to have a nomination by your university, and they have since changed that. So you no longer need to have a nomination from your university. And if you're interested, these are conversations you should be having with an advisor at your university to move forward with the process. And so again, this is a 2-year development program. You'd only be competing against other students who hold a graduate degree or will soon hold a graduate degree. Again, you're receiving quite a few hours of training and development. You're also assigned a mentor. You come in through a true cohort, but the application process is a little bit more extensive. And there's also a little bit more there's a little bit more to the process of being paired with agencies. And so you would submit your application. They would then have kind of a secondary portion, which would be an online assessment. So post your application. So you would submit your application. There would be an online assessment portion, during which agencies would begin to contact you. There would then be an in-person assessment where you would have almost like an interview type format. And during the interview, it has been so. Formerly, you would have been able to come to the agency. They've now started doing some virtual interviews and virtual assessments, and so there has been some variation kind of in the way that looks. If you're interested in kind of the nitty-gritty of what that process looks like, you're also welcome to go to pathtopmf.com, which is on the handout that I've included off to the side. But anyhow, moving on, so after the in-person assessment, they would then host a job fair. So that for those who have been selected to continue on, there would be a job fair, and the job fair is basically agencies who are looking to take on PMF finalists. And so the way that PMF works is for those who are selected as finalists, agencies basically kind of bid to have you join their agency. And so you come on, you would be a full-time employee, and you would, obviously a paid position. But during the job fair, it's almost like a ranking system. And so you would kind of search and shop for agencies that you're interested in working for, and then there would be kind of a matching system post that. So following the job fair, there would then be kind of a job offer portion, and you would either be paired with an agency, and it's almost kind of, if you're familiar with the way that med schools function, kind of the matching system there. So you would be paired with agencies that also selected you. Okay, so looking at PMF appointments from this most recent year. So 13 of the 111 appointments held law degrees. You can also see on the slide where they were paired with and what they were doing. Within the Department of Agriculture, one was at the Forest Service. Within HHS, Health and Human Services, one was at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. There are also 2 at OMB and 2 at Social Security Administration. And so, again, an increase in students who are holding law degrees, and in terms of kind of the government landscape and what's happening within federal service, an increase in hires in the legal realm. So something that should be both encouraging and exciting for you to see. So I know my time is quickly coming to a close, so we'll quickly talk about USA Jobs and a few search tips there. So for those who have seen or been on the website for USA Jobs, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confusing was it? 10, okay. Right. So 1 is not confusing, 10 is very confusing. So again, a 10 and a 9. All right, so the key to USA Jobs is really making sure that you're narrowing your search. And so using specific keywords, but also using the Resource Center, which is on the site, and also using their advanced search. So specifically for jobs that would fall under legal occupations, you would want to use what we call a job series code. And so on USA Jobs, everything is coded by a job series. You would want to make sure to either use the legal codes that are listed here, and I believe there's been a new category added. Let's see. For jobs that would fall under kind of inspection or investigation, and the job series code there is 0300. And so if you're interested in looking at specific opportunities that would either fall under pathways or not under pathways, you would want to begin your search by looking in the 0900 Jobs series. So this means going to USA Jobs under the advanced search, both narrowing down by agency, narrowing down by location if you're interested, even narrowing down by just general occupational field, and then specifically searching 0900 or 09 blank. And you would be able to kind of see a little bit more about what opportunities are available there. Let's see. All right, so that rounds it out. I think, am I doing okay on time? All right, great.
All right, thank you. So we definitely have some time for questions. If anybody has a question, please feel free to ask. Yes.
This question is actually for Sterling. I saw on the Equal Justice Works website the Public Defender Corps, and I just wanted to know if you could give me more information about that program. Is it active?
Sure.
Not, because I saw some of the dates were a little.
Yeah, it's a program that isn't funded anymore. So it's a program that was funded once for 3 years by the Department of Justice, and if I'm not mistaken, the last class of Public Defender Corps fellows are starting their last year. So unfortunately, DOJ decided to discontinue that funding. Yeah, shocking. Never happens.
Yeah.
I've gotten a lot of advice that in pursuing a fellowship, you should pursue a clerkship first. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that path, or on perhaps going through a fellowship application directly after graduating.
From Equal Justice Works perspective, it's really, we have, I would say maybe out of our class of 61 that are starting in the fall, I would say maybe 5 were at clerkships first. Maybe 5 to 10. It really, like, a clerkship, it's a great thing, right? Like, it shows that you're smart and that you have initiative and that you learn a lot about the legal system working in a clerkship. So it's definitely not a negative. If you want to pursue a clerkship after undergrad, pursue a clerkship by all means. It's not going to close any doors.
Yeah, the question, in case you couldn't hear it, was whether to do a clerkship first, if that's going to help you get a fellowship. One thing I would advise is just to talk to your career counselors about that at your law schools, because the time frame for clerkships has changed a lot over the last couple of years. Like, for instance, if you want to do a federal clerkship, you can start applying like at the end of your 1L year or something crazy like that. Like, the Oscar system is no longer as strict as it was before. So it may be that you want to, throw your hat in the ring for a federal clerkship and see if you get one. And you can do that throughout your 2L year. And if it doesn't work out, then you could do a fellowship. So, there might be different ways to sort of time it. Or you could apply for fellowships, and then if you don't get a fellowship, you could apply for state clerkships after that. So there might be a way to sort of, it's kind of complicated, and I would advise you to talk to your counselors. But as Sterling said, like, it's not a bad thing. What you do want to make sure is that you speak to people who've had clerkships, find out what you'd be doing day in and day out, and whether or not you'd enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're working for a judge, at the appellate level, and you're doing all sorts of legal research and writing, that is a different experience than going to the Legal Aid Society of DC and being in housing conditions calendar every day, with your clients, with your representing them as their advocate and sort of going through litigation and all the stages of it. So it's just different experiences. If you don't think you'd ever want to do a clerkship at all in your career, then don't apply for one, but obviously, right?
As a hirer, I can say that I'll go on a limb and say it's better than not a bad thing, just in that we're about to make an offer to somebody, and one of the main reasons I think she won out over some of the other candidates is that she was clerking at the state level for a judge who is in the courts that we practice in all the time, and she doesn't have a lot of practical experience doing what we're going to hire her to do, but we know that she's watched it for a long time, and you can learn a whole lot through that. So I think, probably the the most common path would be clerkship and then fellowship. That said, I don't look for a clerkship as the number one thing, but it's a definite plus. I had appellate clerkship here in DC, and I loved it, and my colleagues didn't. They didn't think it was worth it, but they were holding off on a firm, so they, I think, were looking for their extra $100,000 worth of clerkship experience, and I knew I wasn't going that way. I've got a whole other lecture on clerkships, but I think they're really good and valuable as a whole, with all the caveats that David said too.
Yes.
Do you know, this question is for Ashley, do you know anything about, I guess, the government, the attorney honors programs, and is that like something different from PMS and just the whole process of application for applying different?
Yeah, great question. So there are quite a few honors programs within a variety of agencies, and it is something different. Each honors program has their own application process, and so you would go directly to either the honors website or the agency's website to apply. I actually have a great handout that I would be happy to send to the organizer, and it can be distributed to the I guess to all the attendees who signed in, but I would be happy to send that out, which has a pretty complete list of those programs. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, back there.
Can all of you speak in your various capacities how you would view someone who spent either a split summer or full summer at a private firm, especially I worked in the public sector before going to law school, so I have a bit more experience, but how you put it up.
I guess people are looking at me. I mean, I think that's fine. It's not like a negative that, oh, she worked in a firm and we don't take firm people. I mean, if that's all you did, then I would question whether you were really into public interest, if that's your thing. I mean, there are firms that sponsor their own fellowships, and we don't get a lot of choice on who we get, and it's a little odd, and it's a little odd, like they've spent their whole career in firm type things, and now they want to work for me, which is a totally different atmosphere. Like I don't have my own office. It's just it's a wacky different kind of place, and that would do it. But I'm not going to look negatively at anyone who spent half a summer or a full summer or whatever working for a firm to get that experience, to see if that's what they like. I'm sure you get great legal training there and make a few bucks. So it's certainly not negative. I don't know that it's a big plus unless there was some special project where I figured you picked up a lot of great experience.
Right. And I would agree with that. I would say that it's not, how to put it, if you can craft a narrative around it, I would say then it could be a plus. I went to this particular firm for this particular reason. Their summer associates did this awesome pro bono project, or I got to be a part of this, and it helped frame my future fellowship project because of this. But kind of like what Evan was talking about with the Skadden, one of the biggest things that the Equal Justice Works Fellowship sponsors are looking for is passion. And one of the reasons a staff member like me is in the room when they're choosing their fellow is that's the number one thing we advise them on, are what are the things that we think you should bet on. And the number one thing we tell our sponsors to bet on is the passion. Like if you're choosing between a project that you like better or the candidate that you like better, our almost always go to is say bet on the horse, or the jockey, not the horse. Excuse me, getting the metaphor wrong isn't helpful. But bet on the person with the passion to do the project more so than a perfectly made up project. So that's really my only advice with that. I don't know if anyone else.
I think you answered it pretty well.
Okay, well, in government, that's actually a really great place for you to shine. So there are a number of individuals who are transitioning from private sector into public sector, and that's not uncommon at all. On USA Jobs, you can create up to 5 resumes, and one of the things that we always encourage people to do is to go into a lot of detail about what they did in each of those experiences. Getting through the USA Jobs application process is all about being able to understand the job announcement for the position and being able to tailor your resume to it. Sometimes when the resumes are they go through kind of an automated system, and they're going to look at kind of the keyword pieces, and you have to be able to demonstrate that you have proficiency in those areas. But I would say in regard to having private sector experience, it's not at all going to be a hindrance.
And very back.
You were saying that for Equal Justice Works, working in a firm might be something you have to explain away in a narrative or kind of try and make it fit. I'm wondering if that is the same explanation for a public interest law firm. For those of us who might be considering if we want a firm experience, but we definitely want to be public interest, does that kind of raise the same issue?
Are you talking about a nonprofit law firm.
Yeah, something public, or if you're like maybe working on public pro bono, or if you have a deal with a firm or whatever.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I'd say, again, it just all comes down to if you can demonstrate your passion and your dedication to public interest and public service, you know. That is the main key, and the same with the Skadden, I would say. I don't know. I'm sorry if that's
Yeah,
not
I mean, if it's a
helpful.
private public interest firm and you're doing like civil rights work all summer, and
Right.
they do primarily civil rights work or something like Relman and Dane in DC or something.
Yeah, we consider that public interest,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
there's gonna be require less explanation there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
What if your project changes during the 2 years? SCAD or EJW going to pull the funding, or can you work with your host organization, and find a similar project? Because the law might change.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
No and yes. It's okay if it changes. I mean, they don't keeping tabs on it.
We care a little bit. We care a little bit. But yeah, it's all about, we have like a reporting structure at 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years. And, a lot of our job, because each one is funded individually by a different sponsor, a lot of the work that I do is working with the fellow to have a good relationship with their sponsor, so that the sponsor wants to do it again, and renew and get more public interest attorneys out there. So we want to make sure that, if there is a substantive change, the sponsor understands what's happening. But I mean, I've never heard of an experience where we were like, no, you can't have the funding anymore. I mean, you have to be flexible in the law.
They're all reasonable people, and everyone, the organization, the individual, they have their dream of this is how it's all going to work out.
It never
we have no
does,
idea how
though.
it's going to
Yeah.
work out, right? It never works out that way because we don't know. It's some new project, and we have no idea how it's going to play out. And that doesn't mean you can suddenly do something totally different. I don't know what would happen in those circumstances, but things always evolve over the couple of years, and we've always try our very best to keep them within the spirit of the original application. And I think maybe that's the way to say it, is as long as you can stay within the spirit of that original application without going crazy and doing something totally different, I think you're going to be fine. And as long as you can explain, as you're having dinner with your sponsors and whatever else is going on,
Exactly.
why that was your project and why it's changed and why this still makes sense, it's all going to be fine.
Yep.
I mean, we've kept really close on some of them, and others we've gone a little far afield, but we're always within the spirit of it, and it's never been a problem.
And like you said, I mean, like there are even situations where the fellow doesn't have a host anymore.
Right,
Like
we
they
just
took
lost
on
one of
a
those.
they
So
took on
she
an
just became
orphan.
a staff attorney. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean that happens too, where like if an organization goes under, or they lose their legal director, they lose supervision, something, and we figure it out. We figure it out.
I would say for Skadden too, I mean, they trust you and the organization. They picked you for a reason. So if your project is morphing as a result of what you're seeing on the ground, they think that you're doing it for in the best interest of your clients. So they're not going to try to, monitor you really closely and make sure that you're doing everything that you put in your application.
Yeah.
I have a question for EJW and Skadden regarding doing criminal work. I've heard it's not really something very preferred, but if it touches the criminal system, that could maybe be okay. Could you just
Sure. So we do not fund basic criminal defense work. So if you want to go be a public defender, we cannot fund you. That is not a fellowship project. But what we can fund, and we do fund often, are pieces of that, right? You can work, for example, look up, oh gosh, I'm not going to remember her name now, though. She was at DC. She was here at the public defender office here. And she spun off her fellowship into a standalone school to prison pipeline organization. Oh gosh, I'm not going to remember. Anyways, find me after, I'll remember it. There are places at public defender offices or organizations that work in criminal defense that they need somebody to start a new program, right? Or start, find some piece of some rights that aren't being vindicated in a specific way. And so we definitely fund, especially like school to prison pipeline pieces. Look up Sarah Stout, Staudt. She's in Chicago and Lawndale, working with youth, and she's basically doing criminal defense. I mean, pretty much just standard criminal defense, just not at a public defender office, but it's just like in the juvenile system. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely funded, and I don't know what Skadden is. Though,
Yeah,
so.
Skadden has the same rule about working for an organization, or not working for the organization, but doing work that is criminal defense. However, as Sterling was saying, there's so many things that touch on the criminal justice system.
Reentry work.
Reentry
Yeah, lots of
work,
reentry.
school to prison pipeline, and it's fine in a lot of cases to be at an organization such as the Bronx Defenders,
Brooklyn
exactly.
Defender Service, DC here.
So my
everywhere.
suggestion there would be, if you have a project idea, as David suggested, call Susan and say, is this okay?
Or us.
Or is this something that is, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
like, it's not just, I just meant that, like, Susan's wonderful because Susan, you can actually, like, call and get her on the phone. We may not be the best at it. I'll be honest. It's just a bandwidth thing. But we will, like, bounce ideas off of you.
Is the best way to email you guys or call? Or what would
Fellowships
be
at
the-
equaljusticeworks.org.
Okay.
Sorry. That's not what I meant.
Problem. Yeah, I know you also have phones, so I'm sure you can accept phone calls. But yeah, just call her. And yeah, I'm sorry I didn't mention that when David said that you should call her. But it's not only should, it's if you're going to apply, I would say you must call her before you put in your application, because
Yeah, I don't think she wants to see like a random application come across her desk that she's never heard of.
Right.
Like you definitely need to touch base before you apply.
30 seconds or 1 minute. She's very efficient in her communication style, but you must
For better or for worse.
you must call her.
SVP.
Yeah.
And she's really nice. She's trying to help you.
So
Oh, yeah.
She wants you to
it was,
succeed.
This is her baby. Like, the fellowship program is her baby. Like, it's her entire life, and it's awesome. Like, she does such great work.
so there's another question here. Yeah.
So I've been practicing for 5 years. I'm a judge advocate. You apply for the student program when you're in law school. You have to make a choice. So do you get a lot of practicing attorneys coming back and trying to get back in the public interest? I guess I would mainly be taking
Yeah, we don't get a lot, but I mean, it's definitely a part of our program. You don't have to be a recent grad or coming off your clerkship. We've even had people who were transitioning from private sector at law firms and stuff, and they were like, I really loved my pro bono work a lot more than I liked my actual work, so I wanna try for this. It doesn't happen often, but it does, and it's again, it comes back to your narrative, and if you can demonstrate that this is your passion.
Yeah, and I think that Ashley mentioned that there's a lot of mobility between different types of jobs that you're in and going towards the government. For the Skadden Foundation Fellowship, you pretty much have to be a third-year law student or in a clerkship. But for Equal Justice Works, the rules are not quite as rigid.
Exactly.
I think the standard kind of for Equal Justice is if you're trying to launch your public interest career, and that's what this fellowship is supposed to do for you, and you haven't really been doing a public interest career for the past 5 years, then that's something that they would consider. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so it is 8:30, but we are happy to answer questions individually, so please come up and chat with us. But thanks so much for coming tonight, and good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
You're
David.
gonna come to Blaze.
Thank you.
It's better. I can see.
I just meant, you can also call us.
Good, good.